It's a Thursday. That means we're back. Week 6, the Phil Steele Show, along the College Sports Now podcast feed on the Varsity Network channel on YouTube. Appreciate all the subscribers, all those that are flocking to the video sphere to follow us on YouTube. Again, another record-setting number in Week 5. We had the Phil Steele guarantee. Hopefully that did you well. Last week, Phil, you went a perfect 3-0. As did I. Tripp went 3-1, threw in some picks at the end of the show. Didn't hit on Oregon, UCLA, the cover, which I know hurt you as well, Phil. But it was not part of your power plays. A perfect 3-0. We're feeling good heading into Week 6, aren't we?
Can't argue with 9-1 on 10 plays. Well, I'll take that every single week.
You know,
it's on Sunday.
It sounds a little bit like my daughter and I in softball. I had 2 softball games last night. I went 6 for 6. My daughter, across her first 3 fall ball games this fall, and she's got another one coming up tonight. She has started 9 for 9 with about 6 RBIs. So we're combined 15 for 15 here over the last 2 weeks in softball. And here on the Phil Steele Show, week 5 picks delivered at 9-1. You love it.
Way to go, Pudge.
Yeah, Pudge is an animal. Before we get to what is a pair of games on Thursday night, and it's the first of, Phil, correct me if I'm wrong, is it 56 straight days? Is that the number you have of football? That's what I've seen out there. I think we've got 56 straight days between the NFL and college football. It's glorious.
Yeah, I haven't looked at the number, but I know it's all the way till Thanksgiving or right in that area.
Yeah, it's spectacular. And before we begin with the double dip on Thursday, and by the way, follow Phil on Twitter at PhilSteele042, PhilSteele.com. Still time for the magazine, digital copy. Go on by at Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. Tripp, Locks of the Doc on Twitter. And your boy's back. I am back. Just on a whim, I was able to do another password reset, and everything on the Twitter X sphere has come back to your boy. So at Kyle Schass, it's a clean profile, folks. I'm starting to build from scratch, but it's clean. Trust me. Just a couple of new photos. Got to keep all the followers I gained over the last couple of weeks, too. So I'll take that. But before we begin, I ask if you can, please help on a serious note. Donate, spread the word, ask others to help our friends in Western Carolina are hurting. Communities of Boone, Asheville, so many more from the unimaginable devastation sustained from Hurricane Helene. So a number of ways to do so. Head to nc.gov. Maybe the best way, click the red banner across the top, says donate to hurricane recovery. Our very own Adam Whitten, too, our fearless leader, the voice of Appalachian State football, through his partnership. This is pretty cool for a lot of play-by-play guys out there. Through his partnership with Playmaker PXP, he's donating every penny for play-by-play videos that you submit for youth sports towards hurricane relief in Boone as well. So go to playmakerpxp.com/Adam-Whitten for more information, or just go to Adam B. Whitten on Twitter, on X. No matter how large, how small, it all goes towards so much in helping to rebuild those communities that are so close to where we're recording. Me and Winston-Salem, Tripp in the Greensboro area for sure, and I know Phil would also second that. Heartbreaking stuff. So let's get to football, though, shall we? We got a pair of games on Thursday night, Phil. I'm not going to ask you about each one. Just tell me which one you might feel more strongly about. 2 of the teams played this past Saturday, an entertaining one in Texas State and Sam Houston State. At 7 o'clock on ESPNU, the Bobcats are laying 13 on the road at Troy. The Bearcats are laying 10 on the road at UTEP. That's a 9 o'clock game on CBS Sports Network. Last week, it's overshadowed by Alabama and Georgia, but Texas State and Sam Houston gave us a doozy at NRG Stadium, Phil.
Yeah, they did. Not wild about either game, but I'm going to lean with Texas State minus the points. When you look at this team, they could easily be 4-0 right now. You go back to the Arizona State game, they blew a 21-7 lead in that game. It looked like they had it in hand. And then Sam Houston last week, once again, led it comfortably, 32-21 at the half, and blew it at the end. They've got a potent offense that's putting up 101 yards above what opponents average. And, when I look at Troy, this is a team that was really hit hard by the offseason. They lost almost everybody from last year's squad, and they've been struggling this year, including a loss at home to ULM. I don't know how charged up the fan base will be if Texas State puts up a couple of touchdowns early. So I'm going to go with Texas State in that one.
Yeah, Bobcats blew a 22-0 lead at NRG Stadium before Sam Houston State came back with a late field goal. Troy outgained Louisiana Monroe, allowed the only touchdown for either side in the last 9 minutes of play in a 13-9 defeat. Scotty Walden, seeking his first win as the Miners head coach, forgot he was the head coach there. So I was reminded in the prep work, all 4 Miners games, this is a good note for you, Tripp, all 4 Miners games this year in UTEP, still seeking their first win under Walden. They've all gone under 50.5 is the total in this one on Thursday night.
I like a good under. For me, it's just as fun as the overs. Kicking things off on Friday night with Jacksonville State visiting Kennesaw State. Jacksonville is a 16.5-point favorite. They're off a bye after taking Southern Miss behind the woodshed 2 weeks ago. Kennesaw last week lost at home to UT Martin. Either side of this inspiring to you at all here, Phil?
Yeah, I like Jacksonville State in this one. I think Rich Rod got off to a tough start, but look at the teams he played. Coastal at home, at Louisville, at Eastern Michigan. And then last week they finally got it righted. And, when I was going over the team this year with Coach Bohannon on Kennesaw State, at the end of the phone call, I was like, they don't have a lot of talent. I think in the years upcoming, Bohannon will get that righted, but they're going to be in for, I think they're one of the weakest teams in the FBS. So I'm going to go with Jacksonville State. We saw last week that they could put it on an inferior opponent, and I think they'll do it again this week.
TCU finally got a cover last week against Kansas, winning as a 2-point dog on the road, and now they get what you might think is kind of a reward as they'll get to host Houston, a team that's really been struggling this season, 1-4 overall. It's a big number for TCU to cover. I'm seeing 16.5 right now, but Josh Hoover looked really good last week. He topped 350 through the air. On the other side, the Cougars, they're dead last in scoring offense and FBS. It's just been a rough year so far for Willie Fritz. You think the Frogs can get a cover here on a big number, Phil?
Yeah, I like TCU. And you go back to look at Houston, they're off back-to-back shutout losses. And earlier in the year when they played UNLV, could easily have been shut out there. They scored with 1 minute left to go in the game, an 80-yard drive. I think they went 12 plays, scored a touchdown against the backups, or else they'd have 3 shutout losses this year. We know TCU can put points up on the board on anybody. They'll probably end up with 35, and I don't see Houston keeping pace with them here. So I like the Frogs minus the points in that one.
You might hear from both Brian Estridge at TCU, Kevin Eschenfelder of Houston, the play-by-play guys on the College Football Blitz on Saturday. Cue up Stephen Hartzell, Phil Brain. Rest of the gang, Tripp's going to be on the board beginning at 12 noon all the way until 12 midnight. Check out the College Football Blitz for free by going to the Varsity Network app, College Football audio version of the NFL Red Zone channel every Saturday from noon to midnight Eastern. Just search College Football Blitz on the Varsity Network app. First, Big Ten home game for the Ducks at Autzen, seeking a 5-0 start for the second straight year, 5th time since 2010. 6th-ranked Oregon is hosting Michigan State, 9 o'clock on Fox, Friday evening in Eugene. Ducks are laying 23.5. Dylan Gabriel, only FBS quarterback, completing better than 80% of his passes. 8th meeting, first since the Red Box Bowl. I don't even know if the Red Box is still a thing. We certainly know Blockbuster isn't, but Red Box, where you go to a convenience store, gas station, you rent the DVD.
Not sure.
I haven't seen one of those in a while. Anyways, that was a 7-6 game last time these two met. This one certainly is not going to be 7-6. I like the Ducks here, but they couldn't cover at UCLA last week. Phil, can they cover another big one? 23.5 is what I'm seeing. Aiden Childs returning to the Beaver State.
Yeah, and Jonathan Smith as well. He's prepared for Oregon every year when he was the head coach at Oregon State. And Tripp, our one loss last week, and we should have been 10-0. I mean, in the first half, Oregon had a 302 to 54-yard edge. It's 28-3. They're at the 6-yard line, about to make it 35-3. And the dreaded 96-yard interception return for a touchdown. Somehow that thing's 28-10 at the half. And then, amazingly, Oregon only scored 6 points in the second half. They only had 4 possessions. So a tough beat last week for Oregon, again, especially on that interception return for a touchdown. Ducks are at home. They have Ohio State on deck. So it's not a tremendous situation here, laying this many points. And we saw last week they did put their offense away. But if the Ducks are in Autzen, there's only one way to lean, and they really should have had a bigger win than 34-13 last week. Tripp, talk to me about Oregon.
It was so, Phil, I haven't been in this position too many times, but on Twitter, I do my picks on Saturday, and I think I had 7 games on the board. First 6, all hit. The only game I've got left at 11 o'clock is what I've told everyone is my top play for the entire week, with Oregon to cover UCLA. And I mean, those guys, everything you just went through, it was a brutal thing to watch. And cost me a perfect weekend, but we'll try to get back on I might take Michigan State just out of principle because I'm upset with the Ducks right now.
Did you play a 17 parlay on that trip?
No, I should have. Well, no, I shouldn't have, but yeah, kind of glad I didn't. That really would have hurt. Syracuse at UNLV is the next game on the board here. No Sluka, no problem last week for UNLV against Fresno. The Rebels were just on cruise control in that one, 59-14. Now they get Syracuse, who does present a threat to that undefeated season they've got going right now. This should be the toughest test to date for UNLV. They're laying 6.5 points at home. Kyle McCord's looked really good for the Orange. The offense is averaging 475 yards a game. They're third in the country in pass yards. Should be a fun game here, but UNLV's turning into one of those teams. I just don't want to bet against them.
Yeah, and I think no matter who UNLV puts at quarterback, remember last year, Jaden Maliava came out of nowhere and had a big season. And this year, Sluka was doing well. He came from the FCS ranks, as did Haj Malik Williams, also came from the FCS ranks, and he had a heck of a game last week as they put up 59 points on Fresno. I do think Syracuse will give them a tougher test. I do like Kyle McCord. They've got some weapons on offense, but it's just tough to go against UNLV. And I believe Barry Odom, since he took over at head coach at UNLV, 14-4 against the spread. Already this year, they're doing great against the spread, a perfect 4-0. So I'm going to continue to ride the Rebels. I would have loved this game if they were -3. It's risen to 6.5 right now, and it's tough to give that many points to Syracuse, but I still like UNLV.
This game became possible, too, because of Army's move to the American, who is both factored in each of these schools' schedules. So they were able to find an open date and kind of an obscure spot here with the Orange going on the road. I saw some on Twitter. I think it was David Hale of ESPN said if Syracuse wins, they should take the Sphere in Vegas and turn it in to the Orange head mascot. They've got the technology, right? They should be able to do that for the Syracuse takeover. Let's go to high noon on Saturday, the only ranked-on-ranked matchup. Seemingly an underwhelming Week 6 slate, but you know what that means. Every time we say it, there is plenty of chaos. So still so much to keep you appetized, keep you healthy here this weekend ahead of a monster slate Week 7, which includes Ohio State and Oregon, as Phil alluded to already. But 9th-ranked Missouri at number 25, Texas A&M. The Aggies are laying 2.5, 48.5 is the total, 12 o'clock on ABC. Texas A&M held off Arkansas in the final scheduled annual meeting in Arlington. Thank goodness, should be played on each other's campus against Arkansas. Marcel Reed improved to 3-0, starting for the Aggies at quarterback. Connor Wegman out still with a shoulder. Game time decision potentially could come back. Mizzou 4-0 in consecutive seasons for the first time as an SEC member. Aggies 7 picks, leads the SEC, second in turnover margin. 200-plus rushing yards in 3 of the last 4 games. And Nick Scordon and that defensive line, super menacing. I know Tripp was high on him before that Notre Dame game. I think they might wreak some havoc against Brady Cook. But if Missouri's for real, this is one you got to have. But I don't see it, Phil.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you, Kyle. I lean with Texas A&M. They're at home. I think the teams are pretty close talent-wise. I mean, you look at the receiving core that Missouri has with Luther Burden, Mookie Cooper, Theo Weiss. They've got the quarterback and Brady Cook. I like both Nate Noel and Marcus Carroll. They're solid transfers. Defensively, they're playing well. They're actually holding opponents 56 yards per game below their season average, which to me is surprising given the fact of what they lost draft-wise on the defense, and they also lost their defense coordinator. But when I talked to Coach Elko and went over the team with them, he felt this might be the best defense he's had, and that means they're going to be a pretty good defense. And yes, they were fortunate to get past Arkansas. They got outgained by 82 yards. They had a close one against Bowling Green, but I would rate this game a toss-up, lean with the home field edge. And since the number's under a field goal, I'll take Texas A&M.
A game where we're probably not going to talk as much about defense. A big game in the ACC at noon with SMU on the road at Louisville. Cards favored by 7 here at home after losing in South Bend last week. The Ponies really stuck it to my Noles. I mean, just a disgusting football game to watch last week for Florida State.
Half.
Yeah, second half, it just got completely out of hand. And I did think that going into that game, SMU had been really good against the run. They continued that last week. But I also think Louisville could be in a little bit of a bounce-back spot here. What side do you like on this one, Phil?
I like SMU plus the points. You go back to that Georgia Tech game 2 weeks ago. I thought Georgia Tech was the better team. They had a 410 to 326 yard edge, 18 to 14 first down edge, gave up the blocked field goal for a touchdown, the lateral into the end zone for a touchdown. So really, Louisville only put up 17 points on offense. They had 2 defensive scores. And last week, their first touchdown came right after Notre Dame had a fumble deep in their own territory. I think the 5-yard line, they scored a touchdown. So I'm not overwhelmed with what I've seen out of Louisville's offense so far this year. And Smooth seems to be getting better with Kevin Jennings at the quarterback spot. Slow start, no doubt. I was not impressed with the Nevada nor the BYU game, but they've looked better. They have actually gotten 4 or 5 defensive touchdowns the last 2 weeks. I mean, at least 4 defensive touchdowns the last 2 weeks. So their offense is not as potent as the numbers would indicate either. So I like Smooth plus the 7, potential upset in this one.
Yeah, Phil, I got that exact note down. SMU leads FBS with 5 non-offensive TDs, including that 82-yard pick six of DJU last week. And it sucks some of the drama, too, out of the Clemson Florida State game this week with DJU not playing out with an injury. We'll see Brock Glenn more on that game coming up. First of 3 ACC road games, too, for SMU. Had a lot of home games under the belt in the opening month of the season. First of 2 Big Ten games that features a team that has never won against the other in quite some time. And certainly in this case, in over 20 years, 2 decades, Badgers haven't lost to Purdue since 2003. This game is teed up for 12 o'clock on the Big Ten Network. Purdue is catching 2 touchdowns, 45.5 is the total. And Phil, the Boilermakers parted ways with OC Graham Harrell this week. Can't score 21 points per game, but if you strip the 49-0 win over Indiana State week 1, Ryan Walters' team would rank 130th in scoring. Wisconsin bungled a 21-10 halftime lead over USC in a 38-21 loss. Purdue could be an opportunity, Phil, to really unlock the Badgers' offense, especially under a backup in Braden Locke, who looked more comfortable last week at times. 63-yard touchdown pass last week, longest in 3 seasons for Wisconsin.
Yeah, a couple things. And this one I will utilize the screen here, Kyle. And what I want to show you is if you take a look here, just what Kyle talked about, 17 straight wins for Purdue. And the only times they did not cover, for Wisconsin, the only times they did not cover, look at this, 24.5-point favorite, 17-point favorite, and 23-point favorite. And they're only laying 2 touchdowns here. The other thing I want to point out, and I mentioned it last week, when Wisconsin played Alabama, this game was a lot closer than the final score would indicate. In fact, prior to Alabama getting a 2-play, 69-yard drive right before the half, the yards were 151 to 148. They gave up a lot of big plays. And then last week, Wisconsin led USC on the road 21-10 with 204 yards. Now, Braden Locke, if you read the magazine, is a VHT. You guys know what that means. And so I expect big things out of him. It's his second full year operating the offense as a starter at times. And they've got Ches Maluzzi, so I think they are the better team. They're at home. They're off 2 losses. They just played Bama and USC. Now they take a big step down in competition. And really the Nebraska game last week against Purdue, Nebraska missed 3 field goals in the first half. That kept it close. The Oregon State game, the Beavers pretty much dominated that one. So I like Wisconsin minus the points here.
You're getting a glimpse at Phil Steele Plus, which is a $99 value. Go to philsteele.com for more information, but so much more information. The premium content, the weekly tours are free. You can catch that on YouTube. That's available now on Thursday here ahead of week 6 at Phil Steele 042. But the power ratings, special teams, game-by-game stats, see the color coding. The green means good. The red means bad. Individual team pages for all 134 FBS teams. That's Phil Steele Plus, available when you go to philsteele.com. Get more intel there. Tripp?
We all had Virginia on upset alert a couple of weeks ago, if I remember correctly, when they played at Coastal. But Cavaliers took care of business on the road. They ran for close to 400 yards this week. Slight favorite at home over Boston College. I'm seeing 1.5 right now as a spread. But this is another game. I feel like I want some more information on the quarterback, Thomas Castellanos for BC. Is he going to play? They're saying he was back in practice Tuesday. Still unclear if it'll be him or Grayson James, who led that comeback win last week against Western Kentucky. I know you were on the Hilltoppers last week, and they did get the cover, but saw a huge line movement once we found out Castellanos was out. What's your read on this one here, Phil?
Yeah, and Grayson James is a capable QB, as you mentioned, led the win. But when I look at these two teams, Boston College got a lot of praise for beating Florida State handily, but sorry, Tripp, but it's maybe not as impressive a win. The Missouri game, I like Boston College in that game. We jumped out to a 14-point lead right off the bat. I'm like, this is easy. Then Missouri came back and pretty much outplayed Boston College in the second half. The Michigan State game, here you are, you've got a red bandana game, you're at home, and Michigan State outgained them by 76 yards. And last week, again, Western Kentucky outgained them by 76 yards. They're down by 2 scores in the fourth quarter and fortunate to come out with a win. Meanwhile, Virginia, you hit it right on the head, Tripp. 2 weeks ago, I liked Coastal. Virginia impressed the hell out of me in that game. 525 yards. They played a good game against Maryland. They actually led that thing at the half. They went on the road and a fortunate win against Wake Forest, but this is by far the best team that Coach Elliott's put on the field. When I went over the team with him, I've gone over the team with him all 3 years. This is clearly by far the best team. I like Calandria at quarterback. He is Thomas Castellanos type. He can run, he can throw, dangerous type of quarterback, makes a lot of big plays. Virginia's at home. They've always been a much better home team than road team. In fact, if you look at the last 10 years, I think Virginia at home is a team that is 39-26. Meanwhile, on the road, they're 10-40. So big difference there. I like Virginia minus the points, and I'm glad it's under a field goal. At one point earlier in the week, it bunched up like 3.5, but now it's come down to like 1.5. So get Virginia minus the 1.5 here.
Staying in the ACC, North Carolina followed up their embarrassing 70-50 loss to JMU by blowing a 20-0 lead at Duke and losing 21-20. 12 of 17 games, though, with Pitt have all been decided by single digits. Panthers come to Chapel Hill, laying 2.5, 64 is the total, 12 o'clock on ESPN2. Phil, Pat Narduzzi and the boys are 4-0, first time since 2000. The K-Bell offense is humming. They're off a bye in search of their first 5-0 start since 1991. But here's the kicker. They have not won in Chapel Hill. They've lost all 7 previous meetings. Pitt is averaging 48.5 points per game, good for 5th nationally. I don't think that's the team that Carolina wants to see, Phil, coming off the last couple of weeks. And Eli Holstein, a real ACC Rookie of the Year type candidate. Desmond Reed, 2nd nationally in all-purpose yards, 188 per game.
Yeah, and North Carolina tends to be a head case team. And this year, I really wonder about them. I like North Carolina. Fortunately, they were plus 2.5 last week against Duke. And I chalked that thing up. I mean, it's 20-0. North Carolina totally dominated the game, 220-97 yards at the half. This was a North Carolina team that was off a big loss, and we wanted to take it out on somebody, and they did, except they forgot to play the final 2 quarters of the game, and Duke comes back and actually beats them. Now, this is a Mac Brown that in the locker room 2 weeks ago was saying, should I quit? The players had to talk him off the ledge. Now what do you do? What do you do if you're North Carolina? I mean, you've got 2 big losses in a row, and Pitt, as you touched on, is playing great. They're off a bye. They've got a great mindset. I like Eli Holstein at QB. Their defense, when I talked to Coach Narduzzi this year, he said, Phil, I know we lost a lot of players on defense, but we're going to be actually better on defense than the year before. They got 10 sacks. They're only allowing 2.8 yards per carry. They've got Holstein. They got Desmond Reed, one of the most exciting transfers coming in from Western Carolina and the brand new offense. I'm going to go with Pitt minus the points on the road. And frankly, I wonder what's going to happen in North Carolina the rest of the year. Remember last year, once North Carolina started losing, they lost 5 of their last 7 games.
I mean, North Carolina, they're just turning the page just in time for basketball season there in Chapel Hill, get football off the books, stop worrying about that and get on the hardwood. I do like Pitt here. I really like their quarterback. I like what I've seen from him. And I was talking about this on one of the other CSN shows. Pitt has a chance to be 9-0 going into that matchup against Clemson. I mean, they really do. They could be favored or in a very tight spread in all those games, a workable schedule for them.
I like Holstein in the fourth quarter the best.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Staying in the ACC, Wake Forest heading to Raleigh to face NC State. These two are a combined 0-8-1 against the spread so far this year. Really impressive stuff. I think we'll see the third start in a row for freshman C.J. Bailey for the Wolfpack, unless something changes with Grayson McCall there. Not a ton of confidence on either side of this for me here, Phil. What do you like?
Yeah, and when you look at NC State last week, they only had 171 yards offense. They were +4 in turnovers and somehow beat Northern Illinois by 7. I have been nonplussed with NC State all year. And you go back to the Clemson game. You could say, hey, they put 35 points on the board against Clemson. You know what? They had 14 points at the end of the third quarter. They put up 200 yards in the fourth quarter against Clemson's backups. The Louisiana Tech game, they trailed at the half 17-6. The Tennessee second half was an embarrassment. They barely got past Western Carolina. At least Wake's got an offense. You go back to last week, they missed a field goal at the end of the game, or they could have beaten Louisiana. They should have beaten Virginia, blew a late lead. So it's a Wake team that could be 3-1 at this point with a lone loss to Mississippi. I like what I see out of Bachmeier. Claiborne in the backfield's doing well. And last year they didn't have a great receiving core. This year they do. They've got Marin, they got Green, Alexander. So overall, I'm going to call for Wake to go on the road and get the upset.
45-42. Just 3 years ago, these two played in a top 25 showdown. Tripp, you remember that one? I think those in Winston. That was a college football game. Saturday night production. Pour one out for CFSN. But yeah, I don't think we're going to see that level of points. Tripp, you taking us to Columbus?
Yeah, if we can. I did want to mention Navy and Air Force. It's a 10-point spread. I'm not trying to take this one from you here, but first off, I think we all kind of been high on Navy this year. Also, what about the total here? With the Service Academy and the unders is 35.5.
Normally an auto play.
36.5.
Yeah. Normally it's an auto play to go under in a Service Academy game, Phil, but I'm not quite sure that's the play with this one. I think Navy's going to run it up against Air Force. 1,400th game in Navy football history, and it's against a bad Air Force team. Army-Navy might be for a playoff spot at the end of the year, but this one, I like Navy covering the 10, and I also like this one going over.
I'm going to disagree with you on the total. I can see Navy possibly covering the spread, but the advantage the option has is that teams cannot prepare for it fully. A couple of reasons. They only have 1 week to actually prepare for the option. The second one is they don't have the same type of players to run the option in practice and simulate it. And generally, when option teams take on a non-option team, they score the first couple of drives of the game because teams need to get up to speed. But when service academies play service academies, they know how to defense the option. Last year, perfect 3-0. I believe the number is, let me get the exact number. If you played the last 10 years, service academy games, 26 unders, 3 overs, 1 total. And Air Force is not going to score points here. Air Force hasn't scored points on anybody all year. So you're asking Navy to put up 28, 35 points in this game against the Service Academy defense. I clearly disagree with you on the total, but I can clearly see your side because how does Air Force even score if they can only put up, 5, 7, 8 points a game against non-Service Academy teams? How are they going to score against a Service Academy team?
I'm not moving off of it, not just yet. Wait for my power plays. But you are making me consider the option aspect of it more so than I was previously, because I see Navy has scored at least 38 points in their first 4 games of the season for the first time in 144 years of school history. Why are they going to stop now? That would cover the total itself. Well, they're going against Air Force, so pump the brakes, think a little bit more deeply on it. I'll simmer on that one until the end of the show.
Yeah, and prior to playing Navy last year, Air Force had 42, 20, 39, 35, 49, 34 points. They played Navy. They got 17.
Yeah. All right. Enough of the under talk here. We need to move on to arguably the best over team in all of college football, the Iowa Hawkeyes, heading to the Horseshoe to take on number 3 Ohio State, 3:30 kick in Columbus. The total here that I'm seeing right now is 45.5 on some sites. I really think the over is in play. If there's been a weakness for the Buckeyes, it's been in the first half. They haven't given up a ton of points, but they've given up some yards in the first half of their games. Only giving up 3 combined points in the second half all season for Ohio State. But got to give Iowa a puncher's chance here at scoring a couple of times, Caleb Johnson, who's been outstanding on that offense. And with Ohio State, we know they're loaded. We know they've got talent at every position on offense. Got to think 45's got a shot here, right?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you 100%, Trip, and hit the screen for a minute here, Kyle. I'll show you a couple of things. We do half times right here on the Phil Steele Plus, and exactly what Trip pointed out. Marshall had 203 yards at the half. Michigan State had 186 yards at the half. Michigan State had 3 drives inside the 20 where they didn't score last week. Iowa has got a good offense. And if we go look at Iowa, the one thing that's different this year for Iowa than past years, I'm going to click on the Iowa State game real quick, see if this pops up. They gave up to Iowa State a 75-yard TD pass. You see that one. And then against Troy, once again, the big plays. They gave up, if we're taking a look, 62-yard TD pass, 77-yard punt return, 63-yard TD pass. I haven't seen this out of an Iowa defense. Normally, they're very conservative. Everything in front of them, they don't give up big plays. So you give up big plays, Ohio State's a big play team. Jeremiah Smith, Egbuka, Judkins, Henderson, they got tons of guys that can score. So I do think Ohio State will score. On the flip side of the coin, as you mentioned, Tripp, this Iowa team has an offense. They finally have an offense. In fact, look at this. Last year, Iowa has minus 120 yards per game. This takes into account what you do versus your opponent average. So if opponent came in averaging allowing 400 yards, Iowa would gain 280, 120 yards below that average. Well, this year, Iowa is 80 yards above opponent's average on offense. So if you come in allowing 400, they get 480 on you. So they're putting up the yards. I love the green here, which means they're rushing for 6 yards a carry, 250 yards per game. They've got a quarterback in Cade McNamara that can hurt you, and I think Iowa's finally got the offense. So I do think Ohio State will score. I think Iowa will score, and you're 100% on this one, Trip. I like the over 45.
You can hear from Gary Dolphin, Paul Keels on the Varsity Network app. Out of town, out of market games. Keep up with live college sports. Be sure to download the free Varsity Network app available for both Apple and Android. Listen College Sports Live with the Varsity Network app. Okay, I mentioned Purdue hadn't beaten Wisconsin since 2003. Pitt has never won in Chapel Hill in 7 all-time meetings. Now we've got Indiana going to the pop-up stadium on the banks of Lake Michigan to take on Northwestern, where they haven't played since 2016, and they haven't won a game in Evanston since 1993. The Hoosiers are laying nearly 2 full touchdowns, 13.5, 3:30 game. Big Ten Network, they're 5-0, and they're ranked. They got the number 23 next to their name. Does IU. Kurt Signetti penned a thank you letter to all the students after their arrival and really making their presence known a week ago in the win over Maryland, which was, didn't come easy. They pulled away late, but they're 5-0 for just the 3rd time in school history. 1967 and 1910, the previous other 2 times. 3 games of 500-plus total yards of offense. Cats fell 24-5 last time out against Washington. They're off a bye. They're 23rd in scoring defense at 15.8. Can IU cover the number here, Phil, in Evanston?
Yeah, as you know, I've been bullish on Indiana all year. As mentioned in the Big Ten media poll, they had them 17th. I had them 12th. And go back to last week. I liked Indiana. If you told me prior to the game, Indiana was going to be -4 in turnovers, do you still like Indiana, Phil? I've been like, well, I don't know if we can cover -4 in turnovers. Guess what? They still did. 42-28, a dominating 28-19 first down edge, despite turning the ball over 4 times. They've got the running backs with Ellison, Lawton, and Green. They've got the quarterback in Rourke and some dangerous receivers. And as you mentioned, they've been putting the yards and points up, 49 points per game. They get 273 yards above opponent's average. Now, let's look at Northwestern. Yes, Northwestern has a good defense, but they scored 13 points against Miami of Ohio. They scored 13 points in regulation against Duke, and then they score 5 points against Washington. So they're averaging basically 10 points per game, 112 yards total against Washington. Is it Lausch? Is it Wright? Does it matter at quarterback? I think Indiana's the better team, and I like Indiana to go on the road and get this one by more than the 13.5.
We've been doing this show for like 3 years now, Phil. I don't know why, but I had you pegged on Northwestern this week. I'm really surprised to hear you take the Indiana angle there.
He's got a root for the magazine. I mean, he had Indiana higher than anybody else. He's going to pull for the Hoosiers.
That's right. Well, that was a good nugget, though. I did see that where they haven't won at Northwestern since '93 or whatever, and they're playing in kind of a.
This is not your older brother's Indiana team, and I say older brother because this is not last year, the year before that Indiana's team. You go back 30 years. This is a different Indiana team.
All right, we'll jump back to the ACC. Virginia Tech got their hearts ripped out last week at Miami on that last play that ends up getting overturned. Now they've got to go across the country to visit Stanford. As far as the spot, I really like Stanford at first glance. They're getting at home 8.5 to 9 points, maybe against a deflated Hokie squad coming off that loss, but another game where I want to know what's going on with the quarterback position for Stanford because Ashton Daniels got hurt in the fourth quarter last week at Clemson, and last I saw, he is still questionable here.
Yeah, and that is a big question mark for Stanford because Ashton Daniels is big. And last week, they actually had 230 yards in the first half against Clemson. Surprised me. I had Clemson in that game, and I was surprised Stanford was moving. Clemson did score on some short fields. Now, Clemson made it 40-7, I believe, in the fourth quarter before Stanford got a late touchdown. And Stanford got a late touchdown at the end of the half on Phil Steele, or on my Twitter. I put out a halftime play on Clemson minus, I believe they were 16.5, and they were up 17-0. And then on 3rd and 9, Stanford gets a 19-yard touchdown pass with seconds left in the half to go to beat the halftime one. So that was disappointing. But overall, I'm impressed with Stanford this year. They played well at Syracuse. Tough situation against Clemson. I thought they did well. They actually had a 20-18 first down edge in that game. The thing that has me questioning this game is that with Virginia Tech, they either lose outright or win by double digits. They don't have any single-digit losses or single-digit wins. They either win by double digits or they lose outright. I don't know if Stanford's going to win outright here, but I agree with you. I think the spread should be 7 or less. And the fact it's up there at 9.5, has me leaning with Stanford plus the points.
App State is a 3-point underdog on the road at Marshall, 3:30 on ESPN Plus. As we touched on at the top of the show, certainly more important things than football in the minds of those on the mountain as they visit Huntington. Sending all the best in vibes, but there will be a football game that is going to be played here on Saturday. Not the season on many levels that App was expecting, but a chance to maybe reverse course. And a lot of emotions behind this one, given everything that Hurricane Helene presented a week ago. But because of that, Phil, in the reprieve that this may offer that community and this football team, I just think there is too much emotion involved. I'm kind of running away from this one from a gambling standpoint. I would lean App, my gut, my heart, certainly everything they've been through. But Phil, Marshall has covered the number in every game they've played this season, and they're 3-point favorites at home.
Yeah, once again, like you said, your heart goes out to App, and that's how you would lean. But I got to go with Marshall here. And I watched the Marshall-Western Michigan game. Marshall was dominant in the first half. They had a 286, 93-yard edge. Probably should have been up more than 17-3. I believe they missed a field goal or two. Stone Earl looks good at quarterback. I like A.J. Turner at running back. Now, defensively, in the third quarter, they seem to let up a little bit, let Western back in that game. In fact, at the end of the game, Western's down their 5-yard line. They had to stop them. But look who they lost to. They lost at Ohio State. And that was an Ohio State game where I'm watching good plays, bad plays. It was close to 50-50 in the first half. Ohio State just got some big plays on them. And the Virginia Tech game, I thought they played much better than the final score would indicate, only got outgained by 60 yards. So this is a Marshall team that's flying under the radar. They're at home for this one. I like Marshall minus the points in this one.
ECU at Charlotte. Pirates laying 8.5, 47 the total, 3:30 ESPN Plus. Pirates got 3 TDs from Jake Garcia and a 30-20 AAC opening win over UTSA at home. I was there. I must say that ECU tailgate, Greenville, they show out. That was an incredible experience. A lot of fun last week baking at Dowdy-Ficklin Stadium and on the tailgate grounds ahead of time. Charlotte edged Rice on the road 21-10. In Houston. They've also had to put out some fires. Apparently their DC was going back and forth, some Twitter beef with some fans out there, and Biff Poggi had to issue a statement as well and at least acknowledge some of the extracurricular activity following this program off the field. Charlotte won the only previous meeting, Phil, 10-7 last year. ECU comes in as 8.5-point favorites.
Yeah, and I'm very high on East Carolina this year, as you know. They really could be 5-0. You go back to that App State game, they led, I think they led 16-0 in that
16-0.
game, and then ended up losing 21-19. The Liberty game, they're leading, and then they go to a rain delay or a weather delay, I
It
should
was
say.
17-0 in that one.
Yeah, and they're up 17-0, and they've got the thing locked up, and then Liberty gets a late touchdown when they're running out the clock to have an 11-point loss. So they're much better than both the App and the Liberty game. That's an impressive UTSA team that they just beat at home. Jake Garcia had 7 interceptions the first 2 games, only 4 the last 3. So that's a good sign. And I like the way that Rajay Harris is running the ball. And Charlotte, probably fortunate to beat Rice last week, fortunate to beat Gardner-Webb. I like East Carolina to go on the road and get the solid win here.
All right, undefeated Rutgers and Kyle Monangai. They're on the road this week at Nebraska, 4 o'clock kick in Lincoln. 2 Big Ten teams that want to play physical, tough. I do have some concerns with Rutgers, though, on defense, giving up over 6 yards a carry against the run. I think Nebraska definitely looks to take advantage of that. I also think the Huskers have the edge in the quarterback department with Raiola back there. Nebraska also 5-0 head-to-head in this series going back to 2014. But both these teams have been really good against the spread this season. Phil, what do you like here?
I like nothing here. I wouldn't go against either team. And frankly, if I was to make the line on this game, I would make it Nebraska -7. What's the line?
-7.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So to me, it's a nothing game. And Ethan Kaliakmanis, remember 2 years ago when he played under the offensive coordinator of Minnesota, looked good at the end of the year, the Greek gunslinger. And then this year he's got a 7-1 ratio. He's hitting 62% of his passes. And Raiola sort of looked like a freshman at a couple of times the last 2 weeks. He wasn't overly impressive last week against Purdue, especially in the first half of that game. They did miss 3 field goals. So I think Rutgers is off a fortunate win against Washington, one where they were outgained by 222 yards. I'm not going against Rutgers. I'm not going against Nebraska, but I am watching this game. Be a great game to watch.
I tell you that Fox presentation on Friday night, man, it just looks better, especially in Piscataway and Kyle Monangai. To your point, Tripp, that guy runs angry. He looked like Marshawn Lynch out there at times. And if it weren't for Washington missing 3 field goals, they would have lost that game, though, probably. But, man, Rutgers football is fun when they're relevant, which is just weird to say out loud. But Greg Schiano, I mean, tip of the cap, my man. That has worked out, that retread. It's worked out wonderfully. Tripp, you going to take us to where? Morgantown, Stillwater?
Yeah, we'll go back to the Big 12. Oklahoma State, a field goal favorite this week over West Virginia in Stillwater. Pokes 8-2 in the last 10 against the Mountaineers in this series. Oklahoma State got thumped last week at K-State. They're still trying to get Ollie Gordon on track. He probably likes to see West Virginia on the schedule. He had 280 yards on the ground against them last year. But Neil Brown, yeah, that's right. But Neil Brown does say West Virginia is going to have some confidence after the way they closed out that Kansas game 2 weeks ago. You couldn't play any better than they did coming down the stretch the last 7-8 minutes of that game and grabbing their first conference win there. What side are you on here, Phil?
Yeah, Mike Gundy has owned West Virginia, as you mentioned, 8-2. But I clearly like West Virginia to pull the upset here. Go back to that Arkansas game for Oklahoma State. In the first half, Arkansas completely dominated, 351-77. Should have been 28-0 at the half. Instead, a defensive touchdown kept them in the game. They won it in overtime. The Utah game, 22-3 with like 6 minutes to go in the game. They scored 2 late touchdowns. And even with that garbage yards that they got at the end, they were still outgained by 171 yards. And then last week, I had a big play on Kansas State. And frankly, I always worry about every game. I'm like, oh no, what if this team gets a touchdown, gets an intercept? I turned the volume off on the game at the start of the third quarter. It was 41-13. Kansas State totally dominated the game. Oklahoma State did get a touchdown in the final minute or so to make it 41-20. But I've been nonplussed. And really, I thought UCF last year showed the way to beat Oklahoma State, which is stop Ollie Gordon. Remember that game?
Yeah.
They went down to UCF. They stopped Ollie Gordon, and it was 45-3. And we've seen that happen this year. And the other thing I'm looking at, you're looking at a banged-up Oklahoma State defensive front seven. And their front seven on defense, they're giving up 5.5 yards per carry. How does West Virginia win football games? With the run game. They've got C.J. Donaldson. They got a mobile quarterback in Garrett Green. I think they're going to be able to run the ball in Oklahoma State. And really, the way to beat West Virginia is throw the football. I don't have that much confidence in Alan Bowman. So I'm going to go with West Virginia to pull the upset here.
If we can squeeze one more game into the afternoon session here, top-ranked Alabama coming off a huge win over Georgia and, probably the game of the year. They're on the road at Vandy this week. Vandy's been a pretty good spread team this year. Bama's laying 22.5. You got any interest here on this one, Phil?
No. Neutral field, put Alabama by 28-35. The fact it's at Vanderbilt, I mean, Alabama may have more fans, but you're talking about a massive letdown spot here. And, you got a big game against South Carolina on deck, so no interest at all.
Okay. Duly noted. As I mentioned, the juice has been squeezed from Clemson and Florida State with the DJU reunion. Not going to suit up, not going to play. It's going to be Brock Glenn. Every indication pointing in that direction. Clemson comes in as 14.5-point favorites, 48 the total, 7 o'clock on ESPN. FSU has lost, sorry to twist the knife here, Tripp, lost 3 of 4 games for the third time in Mike Norvell's 5 seasons in Tallahassee after that SMU thumping. Hard to bet against Dabo Swinney in this spot. Coming down the road, revenge game. You think back to last year, the 31-24 defeat at home. Now you get to go on the road. I think FSU is actually a better team without DJU because of all the additional emotion that might be attached to this going up against the team where he spent his first 3 years. But, Brock Glenn didn't show us much in those 2 games he got last year. So what's your read here, Phil, at Doak Campbell, 7 o'clock?
Yeah, not Phil Steele. Plus, I have a schedule thing which has a lot of best bets, and but the best bets in the revenge category are 9-3 this year, 57-23 over 2 years, and this is a clear revenge play. Why? Last year Clemson did not trail for a single second in that game. Had the game won, they're up by 7, driving for a 2-touchdown lead. They fumble, it's returned for a touchdown. Somehow Florida State wins in overtime, despite Florida State having a 429, 311-yard edge and 25-18 first down edge. And that was really a game that stuck a dagger in Clemson last year. So you talk about legitimate revenge, you got that right here. You also have the better team. Since they've brought those freshman receivers after not playing them much against Georgia, led by Brian Wesco, this offense is potent. Florida State, sorry, Tripp, once again, close your ears, only averaging 278 yards per game, 15 points per game. I like Clemson minus the points here.
I think you guys are both nuts. I think Florida State will run away with this one. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. How could Clemson, if this isn't your top play of the week, I don't know what could be. The only thing, and just kind of a gambling question here, I feel like the whole world's going to be on Clemson. I know Vegas doesn't like giving away money. Maybe they just do it every once in a while, but I don't see any way to side with the Noles on this.
Well, the home dog factor in getting 2 touchdowns might have some people playing Florida State.
Maybe just these people haven't watched Florida State. That's all I can think. Yeah, not going to be a fun Saturday night for me. Let's move on. Tight spread in Seattle for the rematch of last year's national championship. Don't know if I can trust number 10 Michigan this week on the road at Washington. Even though the Wolverines are getting 2.5 points, I thought the line was kind of fishy at first, but you dive into it. They were outgained last week by Minnesota. They had to hold them off just to, survive with a win there. Didn't do much of anything in the second half. Washington, on the other hand, they outgained Rutgers by a couple hundred yards and still lost the game because penalties, missed field goals. I don't know. Is there an angle here that you like on this game, Phil?
Yeah, absolutely. And Tripp hit the screen thing again. The one thing I want to point out here is over here, this tells you how you do against opponents. Look at Washington's defense. They held this opponent to a season low, this opponent to a season low, this opponent to a season low, this opponent to a season, 5 season lows. In fact, they're holding opponents to 153 yards below their season average. That's number 2 in the country. Kentucky, by the way, is number 1. You look at Michigan's offense, they're only averaging 310 yards per game. So if they're holding them to 153 below, that's about 150 yards offense for Michigan. And last week, I had Michigan. I got to be honest, start of the fourth quarter, you're like, you know what? It's 24-3 Michigan. There's no way Minnesota can score 2 touchdowns on Michigan. But Michigan led up. started thinking ahead to this game, and all of a sudden let Minnesota back in the back door of that one, 27-24. A little disappointing. So I'm not concerned about the yardage, the fact they were outgained, because Minnesota got all those yards late in the game. I do think Michigan's got a good defense. You look here, they have held 3 opponents to season lows. They're holding opponents to 111 yards below their season average. Their offense is not doing that well. So I like the under. The under is what, 41.5 here? I'm going to go
That's
with
pretty
under
low,
in
yeah.
the Washington-Michigan game. You got 2 dominating defenses. It's a big game. So that means that you play a little bit tighter. You don't take as many chances. I like under 41.5. You like under, Strip, don't you?
I do, man. We've got a lot of them this week, don't we?
I'm going to write that one down. Let's see, 41.5. Okay. I can take that. I can stomach that. 4th-ranked Tennessee on the road at Arkansas. 7:30 NBC. Vols are laying 13.5. 58 is the total. Vols off a bye following that win in Norman. Hogs dropped a 21-17 decision to A&M. Razorbacks a chance to move to 2-1 in the SEC. First time since 2011 it would be, when Bobby Petrino was the head coach. Guided them to a Sugar Bowl berth. 11-2 mark. Also, the infamous neck brace and motorcycle incident. Arkansas won last meeting in Fayetteville. Last time these two squared up in 2020, 24-13. Phil, start time in Fayetteville. It's going to be rocking. Night game, 7:30 on NBC. Tennessee and Arkansas.
Wow. Every week with Arkansas, you don't know what I'm going to say. Sam Pittman's 19-7 as a dog. Here it's even more impressive. 7-1 against the spread versus ranked teams. And we go back to last year. Arkansas wasn't very good, and yet they played Ole Miss within 7, Alabama within 3, LSU within 3. It could have actually won those games. So I know that the money will be on Tennessee, because Tennessee is number 1 in my AGG. Tennessee this year is got an AGG average game grade of 130.4, number 1 in the country. They've got Nico at quarterback. They've got everything you want. But Sam Pittman just does it against ranked teams, 7-1. And last week they outgained Texas A&M by 82 yards, came up on the short end of it. So I am going to take Arkansas plus the points in that one.
Okay. Let's bounce back to the Big Ten matchup. Number 11 USC on the road at Minnesota. Both teams 3-1 against the spread. One thing I noticed with both these teams, they don't seem to show up until the second half. Last week, USC trailed at home to Wisconsin 21-10, proceeded to score 28 unanswered. In the last 30 minutes, Minnesota made a comeback at the Big House. We were just talking about that last week. Came up just short against Michigan, but the Gophers have actually outscored their opponents 41-16 in the fourth quarter so far this year. This game kicks at 7:30. Maybe just don't tune in till 9:30-ish, and we'll start to see some football then. I'm thinking maybe even a first half under of 26. USC's laying 8 points here on the road, Phil. What do you got?
Yeah, and I'm actually going to go with USC. They've been very impressive. Had Michigan not got that 69-yard run on the final drive, I don't think they beat USC, and USC comes into this 4-0. USC's offense this year is gaining 120 yards above what opponents allow. Their defense is holding opponents to 106 yards per game, below their average. Very impressive, both sides of the ball. USC with Lincoln Riley as the head coach, they're going to have the offense. And now they finally have a defense with Danton Lynn as the defensive coordinator. And the thing about Minnesota, I know that the record comes in at 2-3, but Minnesota is not Minnesota. In other words, what I mean is Minnesota with PJ Fleck has had their success running the football. But you look at the 3 games they've played against FBS opponents this year, all 3 losses. They had 78 yards rushing against North Carolina, 79 against Iowa, and 38 last week against Michigan. They're not a passing team. They don't do their best business as a passing team. Max Brosmer is a good quarterback. He's not a great quarterback. They do have a tough defense, but I think the fact that they're playing outside of what they normally play at, they're not going to be able to dominate the game on the ground. That has me going with USC minus the points here. I think they're the better team.
Baylor visits 16th-ranked Iowa State. Clones are laying 12, 44.5 total, 7:30 on Fox. I saw 45.5 earlier, so it's starting to come down because I thought 45.5 was too high. Similar vibes to Michigan at Washington. Cyclones won 20-0 at Houston, ranked 4th nationally, allowing 7.25 points per game. inside track to the Big 12 title game, perhaps. And the Bears fell behind to BYU 21-0. Ended up losing 34-28. They're 2-3, 0-2 in the league. They're desperate, Phil.
Yeah, I don't want to go against either team here, and I feel for Dave Aranda because they could easily have a much better record, but they don't. I want to go back to that Colorado thing. It opened up some scars. But I do feel what you said, Kyle. I think Iowa State has a really good chance of being in the Big 12 title game this year. This is probably Matt Campbell's best team. So I'm staying away from this game. I'll let you guys pick it. We did that last week. Who you guys picking in this one?
I'm going under 45.5 or 44. I'll get it at 44. If it drops any further than that, I'll stay away. But Tripp, what about you?
Yeah, I don't hate the under there at all. Yeah, I like Iowa State for I don't know if I want to side with Iowa State. I think the under is probably the play. If anything, that's probably the side I would take there too.
Good call.
All right, we should have a good one in the swamp this weekend. UCF in town taking on Florida. UCF, man, they just had a stinker last week against Colorado. The Knights were double-digit favorites there. KJ Jefferson had a pick as they were about to score early in that game. They had a fumble in the fourth quarter. Florida was on a bye last week. Billy Napier said it was not a week off. They were getting after it down there in Gainesville. They're coming off that win at Mississippi State where they look pretty good, the best they have all year. Graham Mertz been really efficient through the air. Road teams favored here, though. UCF favored by 2.5, 3 points in the swamp. What do you like on this one?
Yeah, I like the home dog. I think Florida is in a really good situation here. Off a bye, catching UCF off a disappointing game. And I like the Mertz-Lagway combo. I mean, Mertz is hitting 75%. Lagway is very dangerous when you bring him in. They're in the swamp. They're desperate, and they're the home dog. That's got to be insulting as it is. An SEC team, a home dog to the American Conference team. I'm going to go with Florida plus the points there.
A few more minutes left. We'll have Phil's Power Plays out the door. Phil Steele Show Week 6 edition. Again, at Phil Steele 042, philsteele.com. Duke at Georgia Tech. This number, I had to look at this 3 or 4 times. -9. Yellow Jackets are favored by 9 at home. 55 the total, 8 o'clock ACC Network. Coming off a bye, 31-19 defeat to Louisville last time out. Blue Devils are seeking just their 5th 6-0 start ever. First since 94. Other than that, 52, 38, and 33. They took off this series after 90 years consecutively of playing each other last year. So now they're renewing this. And last time at Atlanta, Phil, you might recall a couple of years ago, Duke had to storm back in the fourth quarter. I think it was 14 fourth-quarter points, then missed a field goal that would have tied it in overtime to send it to his second straight OT. I think catching 9 is easy money for the Blue Devils here.
I'm going to lean with Georgia Tech. And here's a stat for you. The last 4 times Duke has beaten North Carolina, the next week, they're not only 0-4 against the spread, they lose by 33.5 points per game. And Georgia Tech's off a bye. I know we're short on time, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
I love when Kyle does his spiel, and then Phil just really calmly says,
Rank them damn devils. Rank them damn devils.
Rank them, you cowards. If you like winning, just bet against the Kansas Jayhawks. They're 0-5 against the spread this year. On the road at Arizona State, 8 o'clock game on ESPN2. Sun Devils favored by 2.5 in Tempe. What do you like here, Phil?
Yeah, I like the way Arizona State's playing defense. Their offensive line is better this year. And Kansas, Jalen Daniels actually has I believe, a 6-9 ratio, something like that. So he's really been struggling. I'm going to go with Arizona State, laying less than a field goal at home.
Okay, 2 late-night chasers. 8th-ranked Miami laying 10, 55 the total at Cal, 10:30 on ESPN. Then Texas Tech at Arizona. The Wildcats are laying 6, 64 the total, 11 o'clock on Fox. Tripp can wax more, provide more intel on the Wildcats if you want. But for Miami Cal, it's game day. First time ever in Berkeley. It's going to be a long day. 6 o'clock local time, a.m. Game day will start. The game is not until 7:30 local time. I think the Canes are just so much more physical, so much more athletic in the trenches. I love the Cal team, but Miami, after escaping narrowly at home, I think they're going to come in trying to make a statement. The late kick might help them with the cross country.
Yeah, and Cal's also got one of the best secondaries in the country, so that's going to be interesting to see how they match up against Cam Ward. I give a slight lean in this one to Cal. Very impressed with what I've seen out of Fernando Mendoza at the quarterback spot. And, of course, Jay Knott, I look for him to finally get unhitched here coming off a bye.
I mean, the other game, really good late night game in the desert with Arizona, Texas Tech. Can I interest you in the over here? It's at 64. Looking at Texas Tech box scores, you'd think they played in the NBA with some of the numbers you've seen on both sides of those games. It should be a fun one to stay up for.
Yeah, and the only game they haven't scored at least 30 points was the game Taj Brooks missed, which was against Washington State. Brooks has got 551 yards rushing, 5.3. I lean with Arizona, but I like the over better. Fafita, McMillan going against that Texas Tech defense. Yeah, I like the over here.
Yeah, classic sicko stuff when you're looking to catch up from any of the day's losses. And hopefully you don't have any losses after paying attention to us each and every week. But an over 64, that's starting at 11 o'clock on Fox. All right, Phil, your power plays for week 6.
I got 3 of them. 2 of the games we've touched on so far. One was Clemson minus 14.5 over Florida State. SMU plus the 7 over Louisiana. And one quick thing, click to the screen. I want to show you a stat I stumbled upon when I was doing some research here today. This is Coastal Carolina and Old Dominion. And we give you all these spread numbers. So if you want spread numbers dating back the last 10 years, they're here. Coastal Carolina as a conference home favorite. Look at this. 0-1, 0-3, 1-3. So they are 1-7 as a conference home favorite the last 3 years. Old Dominion is a conference away dog, 4-0, 3-1, 2-1. They are 9-2 as a conference away dog. Old Dominion's faced a much tougher schedule. They've got about 100 plus schedule difference here. They've taken on 4 bowl teams. Coastal Carolina hasn't. I'll take Old Dominion plus 5.5 against Coastal Carolina.
That's some good stuff. That's some high-level stuff from Phil. Clemson, SMU, and ODU plus 5.5 on the road. Tripp, what are your plays?
I like Clemson. Can't go against that one. That's probably the best play on the board, if you ask me. I also like TCU. I know Phil liked them to cover a big number. Houston's just a great team to bet against. So is Utah State. So give me Boise to cover a big number. I think it's up to like 26 right now. But I like Boise. They're the better team. They've got a guy they're trying to get the Heisman Trophy for in Genty. And just because we're getting too chummy here and agreeing on too much stuff, I'll take Tennessee off a bye to go against you guys on something.
Yeah, going against Sam Pittman. I'm going to take those Blue Devils. Hold reliable. I can't go against Duke. They have the longest win streak in the ACC, 3rd longest nationally. They've won 7 in a row. Make it 8 straight when they go to Bobby Dodd this weekend. Also, Iowa State under 44.5. And Navy, I'm going to hedge here, Phil, based off, the Air Force handicapping against the option. I get it. The Commander-in-Chief Trophy first leg. I'll just take Navy to cover the 10. I won't go over the 36.5 that I was leaning, but Navy will definitely cover the 10, coming in as a heavy favorite on the road. Phil Steele Plus Tour is available. Follow him on Twitter at Phil Steele 042. Phil, anything else we can push here ahead of week 6 for you?
No, just make sure you check the Phil Steele Plus Tour, and it's great doing the show with you each week. You got to give a lot of interesting information on the games.
It's been a lot of fun. We only get better each and every week. Every day is the Super Bowl. We'll be back for another Super Bowl next week, week 7 on the Phil Steele Show. Thank you.